What is up? What is up? And welcome back to another episode of Blood and Beer, the show where we talk blood sport and we drink beer. I'm your host, Matt, and as always, we've got blood sport to talk and beer to drink. We got UFC 310 this weekend, final pay-per-view of the year. And we're going to be making some picks today. I got my friend Seth with us. We're going to be going over the whole card, making some picks, and making you some money. So, Seth, we got a UFC newcomer fighting for the title this week. We've got two undefeated fighters. It's a huge card, great matchups. So, we'll just get started on this first one with Kennedy and Nchekwa taking on Lucas Brzeski. What do you think about this fight that we got?
These are two fighters that I haven't really gotten the chance to see. I think I watched Nchekwa get absolutely obliterated in one of his fights. Um, However, looking at the betting odds here, he's a minus 600 favorite on ESPN. Just given that, and I've looked at Brzeski, his record. He's got similar. He's 9-5, and Nchekwa is 13-5. I think Nchekwa's got a little bit more experience, and I think on this fight, I'm going to go with Nchekwa. Maybe by the distance, I don't know if he's going to be able to pull out the knockout, but I'll go with Nchekwa.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm a big Nchekwa fan because some fights when I watch him fight, he's awesome. He'll get beat on for the first two rounds, and then he's got a gas tank, so he just uses boxing and knocks people out in the third to get the win. But sometimes he's gone out there and gotten knocked out in the first round by a Vince St. Preux or dog walked by him. So you just don't know what you're getting with this guy. It's his second fight at heavyweight, but Lucas Brzeski looks like he should be light heavyweight too. He's a real tall guy. He just has this weird belly hanging over him that you cut 15 more pounds and you're there. But I just think Brzeski's one of those guys. UFC, they do it a lot with heavyweights where they bring these guys in just to get beat by people they want coming up. You look at Josh Parisian, really everybody from the Contender Series that's a heavyweight. They're just like, let's feed him to the wolves, let him have a 2-5 record and cut him. So I
Yep,
think the odds pretty much say it all on this one, and Nchekwa's taking it. But he could go out there and just not show up, get knocked out, and because he's done that before. I mean, if you're losing to Vince St. Preux in the past 5 years, then you're doing something wrong.
definitely questionable, that's for sure.
Yeah. Now this next one, Clay Guida versus Chase Hooper. What the fuck's Clay Guida doing on here? But I love it. I love his motor. I love it's a Chase Hooper's a minus 1,300 favorite last I checked. I mean, probably pretty cut and dry here. He's a beast grappler. He's got a lot better ground and pound. His striking's really improved, and Clay Guida is doing the opposite of Jim Miller, where Jim Miller's winning at 42 against these young guys. Guida's just going out there and dropping just about every fight that he's got, or getting the wrong end of a split decision working for him. Do you have any different takes on that, or is that one?
Man, Clay Guida's been in the game forever. He's 42 years old. I want to say he's on the Jim Miller train, but you look at his record, he's lost the past like 5 or 4 fights I think that he's been in. Now, granted, it's been close and he's made it ugly. I think his only opportunity against Chase is to keep it on the feet and make it ugly. If you can't do that, I see Hooper hitting some weird ass submission on him and probably putting him out early, I would say. Give me Chase Hooper round 2 submission.
I like that. I like that. I think with the 12-6 elbows, last fight I watched Chase Hooper and he was throwing some vicious ground and pound, and the way he can get body locks and he can slip an arm in there without having a triangle all the way, it leaves it wide open for those ground and pound shots. I think it's going to be a club and sub type of thing where he's beating him up and Guida goes to cover and submission pretty
For
early.
sure.
Now this fight, I was blown away by the odds, but Michael Chiesa taking on Max Griffin, plus 120 for Chiesa, minus 140 for Max Griffin. How do you see this one going?
So the odds have closed a little bit. Right now we have on Bet ESPN, Michael Chiesa is a minus 105 and Max Griffin is a minus 115. So it's closed. It's pretty much a toss up at this point. Man, I tell you what, I like Michael Chiesa. He is a veteran of the game, but I think when he fought Tony Ferguson last, whoever lost that fight was really supposed to hang up the gloves at that point. Tony Ferguson was on his skid. I think UFC did Michael Chiesa a favor in giving him Tony Ferguson. They are not doing him a favor by giving him Max Griffin. Max Griffin is an animal. I think he's still got that fire. I think Michael Chiesa is getting older. Although he has done a lot for the sport, I think this could potentially be his last fight in the UFC.
I think it should be his last fight too. I'm a big Chiesa fan. His story's awesome. He's a great broadcaster when he does the post fight shows and everything. But other than that Tony Ferguson fight, which Tony Ferguson isn't even a fighter anymore. He's just going out there and getting beat. But other than that fight, he's looked like shit lately. And I mean, he used to be a BJJ guy, and then he's getting caught in submissions by guys like Kevin Holland and, guys way lower on the ranks. Max Griffin's got power. He like prides himself to be this legend killer. He was on this tear where he was just running through legends until he ran into Neil Magny, and still athletic. He's not going to be dumb. He's not a dumb fighter, so he won't shoot a takedown and get caught in a darce or anything. It's just
Yeah.
I couldn't believe the odds were this close with Chiesa being as bad as he's been lately and as inactive as he is. Because if you follow him on social and just watch the post-fight shows, this guy's not training year-round anymore. He's coming in the gym for the camps, and then he's going back to the booth, going back to doing his thing. I think this one's pretty cut and dry too, Griffin. It'd be nice to see Chiesa get it, but he should have hung it up a while ago. And win or lose, if he does pull this out with some crazy submission, I think he needs to hang it up because it's time. He got so close at one point in the top 5 at 170, and then just it was like it was not quite as bad as Ferguson, but just a super sharp drop off. He was winning everything, and then just looked like a shell of himself. After I
Yeah,
think
I
it was the
agree. I think
Vicente
his
Luque
only his
fight.
only method of victory is to catch a submission. I don't see him putting Max out on his feet. Uh, Max has decent wrestling. I think he can fend off any takedown that PS is going to throw at him. So Max has to hurt him on his feet and keep it standing.
Yeah, yeah. I just don't see a path to victory for Chiesa unless Max puts his head out there and gets caught in a ghillie or a Darce choke,
Yeah,
something where you leave your neck out. And I don't. I think since the tape's out on Chiesa, people aren't doing that. They're not
yeah.
shooting those naked takedowns where they're unprotected. This fight's going to be a good one. I got a pretty definite pick in mind, but Joshua Van versus Cody Durden. I know the odds say what they say, but Joshua Van, he's a weird fighter. He can he can finish guys in the third round and the second round. He's got really good boxing, good short power, short shots, and he's durable as hell. But he lets fights get away from him sometime. And against a guy like Cody Durden, who's just moving forward, that he's kind of like a Clay Guida at 135 or 125, whatever he is. He's always moving forward. He's always pushing the pace, and he's a wrestler that likes to keep it on the feet. That might be a problem fighting a guy like Van, but it's going to be a weird fight. I think Van's going to take it because every time I pick against Van, I lose, and every time I pick for him, I win. So I'm going with Joshua Van in this, but it could be a fight kind of like what you're saying with Clay Guida and Chase Hooper. If Durden can make it dirty, outpace him, he could get this one done, especially if he comes out fast and takes the first 2 rounds and just lays and prays for that third one.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. Josh Van had a lot of hype coming into the UFC, and I think that he's underperformed. He really has. Like you said, he lets these fights get away from him. He waits to the second or third round to start pouring on the pressure. And in the UFC, you can't really do that. Other promotions, maybe. But, he's got I think it's a 2-inch height advantage for Durden and also a 2-inch reach advantage for Durden. If Durden can fight behind his jab, keep the distance, like you said, he's got good wrestling and he doesn't really use it. I think he's going to have to against Van because all it takes from Van is one punch to catch you. You're on fucking Hurt Street and you ain't recovering.
Yeah.
So he's going to have to make it dirty. He's going to have to utilize his wrestling and get Van to the ground. But I agree with you. I think Van pulls this out. It's probably going to be a decision. It's probably not going to look pretty the way the UFC wants it to. I mean, the man's what? What's his record here? I think I have it pulled up. He's 11-2. He's not a chump fighter, but you watch him fight and you're like, what this guy has only lost twice? Like it doesn't make sense.
Right,
So
especially in the first couple rounds watching him, you're like, this guy, like I remember watching him against Charles Johnson couple months back,
yeah.
and that was when they were talking about Joshua Van being up there with the Tatsuro Tairas, and there was one other 125er they were real big on that lost at that
Mm-hmm.
time. But they were saying that he's in that same category, and then he goes out there, looks the first fight he looks good in the first 2 rounds, but then he gasses and gets knocked out cold by Charles Johnson, who doesn't knock anyone out. Like
Yeah.
it's just he's such an anomaly of a fighter. It is weird to see that he's only got 2 losses, and the wins that he gets in the UFC, they're against decent opponents, but they're almost like the Lucas Brzeski guys that they bring in knowing that they're not going to be anything.
For sure.
Sorry about that. Uh, and then Chris Weidman versus Eric Anders, catchweight bout 195. What's this doing on the prelims? What you think?
Hey man, I tell you what, I had the privilege to meet Chris Weidman in person. I went to UFC 302, did a meet and greet with him. We actually share the same birthday. I'm gonna go with my man Chris Weidman for sure. Eric Anders, I think he's like you've been saying, man. That's just someone that the UFC throws in when they need someone to fight somebody. He's a punching bag. He's got that chance, obviously, as a puncher's chance no matter what the fight is. But Chris Weidman's got that wrestling background. I think he channels that. He was ready for the fight previously.
two
Maybe it was
weeks ago.
309 that he was supposed to fight him on.
Yeah.
Anders pulled out with some injury or illness. So I think ever since then, Chris has stayed sharp. He's been putting steel to iron, and I think he gets the victory.
I think so too. Weidman looked kind of weird in his last fight with Bruno Silva. He looked like how Frankie Edgar did at the end before he started losing all the fights, where you're fighting like a lot of volume and trying to keep your chin away from the guy. And against Bruno Silva, that's a guy you got to do that against. Eric Anders, he can hit hard, but he doesn't really get a lot of knockouts. He's not really a great wrestler. He's very explosive. He can get takedowns, but he can't really keep guys down. I just think he's one of these guys. They brought Eric Anders in as such a raw athlete. This guy that has all the potential in the world. Just looking at his physical abilities, just never the jiu-jitsu never came out. The striking was never really top tier. He's decent everywhere, but I think Weidman is probably gonna. I don't even think he'll wrestle him this fight. I think he's gonna do what he did with Bruno Silva and just jab him to death in a couple, short flurries on the run in and then get out because he knows what his chin is now. And that's the biggest thing when you're a vet. I feel like when the chin's almost gone or might be gone, knowing that and not getting in those firefights. And Chris Weidman doesn't even flirt with those firefights. I mean, he's like, even if I catch you, I'm not gonna dive in for the attack because I know one shot's putting me out. And he does have that championship mentality that he's won it. He's been at the top of the game. He was the best in the UFC at one point, at least the best middleweight, no doubt. And yeah, Eric Anders, he's just not a guy I'm really high on. And Anders said something about how he's sober for the first time. This is the first camp he's sober for, and this, that, and the third. And I'm like, man, I wondered if that might have been part of what the illness was, if like he started drinking again or if he started doing something again right before 309 fighting at MSG. There's nothing that says that's what it is, but it's like when it happens that shortly before a fight, you got to wonder, especially when he's talking about that constantly leading up.
Yeah.
It's just there's a lot going on there. So I got Chris Weidman. I think Eric Anders is probably going to retire after this. Weidman should might not. I mean, he could go the Jim Miller route if he's fighting guys like Eric Anders in the middle of the pack where he's not trying to get back to the title. I hate seeing guys that are over the hill fighting top 15 guys. So I do like
Yeah.
this fight for him, but yeah,
Yeah. I
Chris
mean, if they're
Weidman.
gonna keep him, if they're gonna keep him as a gatekeeper, by all means do it. Then that's totally fine. I get the vibe from him that I think he's ready to be done. I think he's ready to move on to bigger and better things, but he's still got that competitive edge, and that's why he's fighting. Uh, I think if he would have won an MSG at home, sail
That
off
would
into the sunset, that was his route. But didn't work out for him. It'll work out for him this time. We'll see him probably sail off into the sunset of this fight.
Yeah, I would have been a lot more confident in the retire. I would have bet on a retirement at the MSG card if he got
Yeah,
the win because I mean that hometown, he's in front of everybody, but he didn't get that. So that's what makes me kind of think he might stick around for another two or three cards, two or three fights to try to get to the end of next year so he can retire in MSG. He's 0-2 in MSG, so that might be something that's kind of sour for him. But we're moving on. This is the fight I'm most excited for on the prelims. We got Randy Brown taking on Brian Battle. Brian Battle's my dude. I hated him on The Ultimate Fighter. I was like, this guy is clunky. He's awkward. He doesn't really have any skill. And every time I watch him fight, he grows on me more. And after that Paris fight, I mean, I was a big fan before the Paris fight. He had won me over in some of his other fights where he just fights like a warrior. But that Paris fight, this dude's riding high. They're giving him Randy Brown, who's kind of been up and down lately and it's going to be a good match for Battle to test his chin. He's going to get hit with some stiff jabs and some stiff rights. And then when Randy Brown's tired, Battle's going to go in there, make it dirty, and I think he's getting him out of there in this one. I love the energy Battle brings. He reminds me of like a 2005 to 2010 fighter that just he's a fighter's fighter. He loves that.
Yeah,
So
I agree with you, man. I mean, the odds right now have him at a minus 225 favorite. Honestly, could go higher, I think, as we inch closer to fight night. Yeah, he made a name for himself in France. Anytime you have an epic octagon speech like he had then, people are going to start watching and paying attention. The fact that they have him on the first fight of the regular prelim card, kind of sketchy, but honestly, you look at the rest of the card, the fight placement on this card is all over the fucking place. And we'll talk about that later with some other fights. But I agree with you. I think Brian Battle wins this. I think it'll be a nasty fight. This is honestly my fight of the night contender for from the start. Um, I'll go Brian Battle. Brian Battle, either I don't know if I'll get him out because Randy Brown's got that chin on him, but if he does, it'll be early with a good shot, I think.
I think it'll be a situation where we see Battle beat him up for 3 rounds. Maybe not the first round. First round's going to be competitive, and then Battle gets fired up when he goes back to that corner, and he turns it on. He's a gamer.
Yeah.
He's not really the most skilled. He's not the best fighter, but he just I shouldn't say the best fighter because he does fight. That's what he does. He the opposite of Bilal Muhammad, who's just like, I've got my game plan and we're sticking to it. Battle's out there like, all right, what are you going to give me? And I'm going to take advantage of it. And I love that in a fighter that is willing to go everywhere and is so confident in himself everywhere he goes.
I'll tell you what, for the betters, right now, over 2.5 is minus 115. So if you're looking for a little better payout, minus 225 to minus 115, under 2.5, Brian Battle. Sounds like a good bet to me.
Yeah. I got in on him at the beginning of the week. Well, at the end of last week when he was minus 190 on DraftKings, and I was expecting it to actually come down closer to closer to Randy Brown because people were hot on Randy Brown a year ago. I
Yeah.
mean, he was the next big thing, and now it's he's old news ever since. Who did he lose to? Was it Mocano? No, that was Jalen Turner. I forget who he's
Dude,
lost
that
to.
fight was fucking ridiculous. I'll tell you that right now. Taylor couldn't let that get away from him easily.
That dude.
He lost to Jack Madalena.
He got submitted by Madalena pretty
Yep.
quick. Yeah.
But he's been on a 3-fight win streak since then. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just
I think it'll be a good fight. Like I said, fight of the night for me. I'm still going to go Brian Battle. I think, like you said, turns it on, puts the pressure on him. Be fine.
and I was confused about a lot of the placement of fights on this card being on the prelims. I heard some people from the UFC coming out and they said one of the main reasons they're doing this is because they are getting they have a feeling that these prelims are going to be really highly watched on ESPN and they want to get some of these guys out there. I don't know how how it'll be, but if they've got the Japanese crowd from Kai Asakura, you've got the Brazilians, you've got people from all over the world tuning in, and they get all that shit for free anyways. So I think just put the best on the top of the card, but also the main card has some gnarly matchups aside
Oh,
from
yeah.
one. But yeah, we'll move on to a fight that should be on the main card: Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. What do you think about this one?
Evolve. Aljamain Sterling can talk his fucking ass off all he wants. Mosbar is 18-0. He fights Khabib-esque, but I think he's got better hands. We watched him fight Diego Lopez. Diego Lopez fought him to a close fight. I get Aljamain's a wrestler, and coming from a wrestling background, I want to respect that for sure. I just think those fucking Russian Dagestanis are different, man. They put that pressure on the ground control that they have, wrist control that they have. I'm curious to see how Aljo handles that.
Yeah,
We
I'm
watched Aljo get put down by Sean O'Malley.
he
Like,
got he got taken down by Piotr Jan several
yeah.
times. I mean, Jan's not a wrestler at all. He got taken down by Marab 50 times. I mean,
Mhm.
but I tell you, and I got Evloev in this too. I think Evloev's just so boringly dominant. When he stays on the feet, he's fun, but he's not winning the fight dramatically when it's on the feet. When it goes to the ground, he is a control guy. Like, and that's why they put it on the prelims, is because Aljo could make it a fun fight. His grappling style is a lot more entertaining because he's taking the back and going for submissions. Evloev's kind of trying to lay on you, hit a couple dirty ground and pound shots, but nothing major. If it goes one sided of Evloev, if that's like your third fight on the pay-per-view, that's going to take all the air out of the arena. Whereas if you move it up to the prelims, at least then you have chance to build the hype back up and build the mood back up. But with Evloev, I mean, he's gonna dominate Aljo. Like I said, Aljo got taken down by Piotr Jan. Evloev, he let his knee get snapped in half by Diego Lopez and didn't tap. The dude's tough as shit. Aljo's I just moving up in weight. He's fighting the bigger guy. He's strong as shit. Aljo's super strong. Marab said that Aljo's been dominating him in the gym lately. He can't take Aljo down, but that doesn't mean anything because Marab looks like a 125er, and especially when you train with someone every day. You know it from wrestling. I know it from boxing. I could go against some of the guys that were competing on the Junior Olympics team and do great in sparring. But if I went up against a guy they're fighting, I'm going to get my ass kicked because I don't know them. I don't know their tendencies. I don't know what to stop. So,
Yeah,
you
I mean
know,
the gym is the gym, man. When you say that, like, sure, Marab, Aljo, they're friends. Marab's going to say what he can to hype the fight up, bolster his friend, and that's what you should do, honestly, as training partners. You look at Evolov. Here's the thing that I think that it might be getting overlooked. His last fight, January 2024. He's 5-0 from 2021 on, but he had two fights in 21, one fight in 22, one fight in 23, and one fight in 24. To me, I mean, Evolov right now is minus 260 money line. Over 2.5 is like plus or minus 375. Your money is going to be money line on Evolov, I think, and I think he probably gets this done dominantly.
yeah, I think Evloev's kind of an anchor piece to a parlay this
Yeah,
weekend.
I agree. Yeah,
Like, there's not a lot of money there because submission's going to be the pick for him. He's not going to knock him out,
yeah.
and it's submission or decision with him. Both of them probably pretty bad odds, and his money line no good. So he's a parlay hold down. I don't like parlays at all because that's how sports books make 80% of their $8 billion a year. So
I'm one of those guys. I make their money for them because I'm
yeah,
like, I'll do an 8-leg parlay. It'd be good to go.
only time I've ever done a parlay was like 2 years ago. It was when Khalil Roundtree fought Dustin Jacoby. I had an 8-leg parlay in, and Khalil Roundtree was the last leg of it. And Dustin Jacoby beat the shit out of him.
Oh yeah.
And then I was sitting there and I was like, second round, I'm like, should I cash out? It's only offering me about half. Fuck it. Oh, wait. Khalil can knock him out. And Khalil got beat up for the rest of the fight. And I was sitting there like pulling my hair out, like, son of a bitch. And then
Oh
they
yeah.
raised
The only time I
Khalil's
ever
head.
had a large parlay like that work out was when John Jones came back to fight Cyril Gahn.
Oh, yeah.
And ironically, Shavkat Rakmanov was my closest fight of the night because I had him winning inside the distance. And he
Oh,
went
well,
until the fifth round and submitted Jeff Neal with literally 15 seconds left. I'm sweating in my bed, like, he's got to do this. He's got to do this. And he does. He pulled it out. But I bet it was like a $10 bet and I won $1,200 off of it. So I
yeah,
was I was
that
pretty good with that, but that is literally the only one I've ever hit in my life. So
Yeah, mine was only a $2 bet, but I turned into 180, so it felt pretty good.
there you
But
go. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. All right, we're gonna move on to the next fight. Demba Garimba taking on Vicente Luque. Garimba's a minus 160 favorite. Luque plus 135 dog. I love Garimba, but how do you see this fight? Because it's a weird matchup.
Man, I agree with you. This is interesting to me. Vicente Luque had everything going for him in the UFC. My man looked like a killer. He looked like he was the up and coming Paulo Costa that Paulo Costa didn't even know he was. But has hit a skid. I mean, he just can't win in the UFC. I don't know what it is. He's just looks flat every time he comes out. Thimba has got the rock behind him. My man's a fucking killer right now. He's got that hunger. I'm gonna go Thimba Garimbo. I personally, as a fight fan, I hope the fight is closer than what I think it's going to be. But I could see Thimba ending this early. Round
I
one, two.
I think Themba too. This Vicente Luque, like you said, he looked like a killer a couple years ago when he tapped out Chiesa. When Chiesa, they were talking about him getting a title fight after
Yeah,
beating Luque. He puts Chiesa in a round one choke, and then he goes out there, beats the shit out of Tyron Woodley. Goes out. I mean, he went on this incredible run, and then it wasn't like you saw him have a close fight, and then a drop off. He was another one of those guys where it was like a drastic drop off where
yeah,
I think he won his last fight. No, he lost to Joaquin Buckley. And
yeah. Not even close. He got knocked out second round.
Yeah,
He
and
beat Rafael dos Anjos by decision, which is
Dos
good, but
Anjos,
dos Anjos is not the fighter he used to be.
he's a dinosaur now. I mean,
Yeah, and since that fight, he didn't fight. He only fought in 2022. So
yeah, and he seems to have lost either the mindset or maybe he lost the physical ability. He's just, you know, knees go and you're done. I don't know, but I think Demba Garimba, he's one of those dudes that he might not be the most skilled, but he's super physical. He's super strong. Not necessarily punching power, but his wrestling, it's not necessarily super technical, but when he gets those body locks, it just looks like you're not getting out of it. And the guy's huge for 170.
oh yeah,
And I think it's going to be one of those situations where halfway through the second round, we're going to see Vicente Luque kind of check out the way you see older fighters do when they realize they're past their prime. They shouldn't be in there. You're going to see the retirement mid fight, I think, in this one. And Garimba's just going to probably get a decision win that, looking back in a couple years, if you were to look at this fight on paper, you'd be like, man, how did Vicente Luque lose to this Demba Garimba guy? But you look at the time period that we're in, he's not the same Vicente Luque from five
no,
years
not at
ago.
all.
And speaking of people not being the same, Anthony Smith versus Dominic Reyes. Oh, Reyes looked good last
How?
time
Yeah,
out.
I was gonna say, how the fuck this is the main attraction on your prelims is kind of beyond me at this point. I get the UFC stance. Anthony Smith is a great commentator for him. Dominic Reyes, his only dominant performance was when he almost beat, or you can arguably say beat John Jones. Ever since then, my man does not look anywhere near that level. Sure, he
No,
knocked out Justin Jacoby in their last fight. To me, this is I think this is going to be a boring fight. I'm not going to lie to you. I think it'll be a 3 round touch and go fest of I don't want to get hurt, so I'm going to stay on out range. I'm going to try and touch you a little bit and win off points. Anthony Smith is not knocking anybody out. I'll tell you that right now. He could catch a submission, as we've seen in the past. Dominic Reyes would be the more likely fighter to knock somebody out. But again, I think he's nervous, man. I really don't see him going into the fire like he used to. To me, I couldn't tell you who would win this fight. If I had to put money on it, I'm going to go Reyes, just because I think Anthony Smith's got 1 foot in, 1 foot out, already commentating. I think he's already got his spot cemented with the UFC if he needs to. And I think this is for him, it's more pride than anything.
I think the same thing because he went out there in his last fight against Roman Dolidze and looked like shit, taking short notice. Whatever, short notice you lose. Shouldn't against a guy like Dolidze. But Smith's striking has looked horrible lately. I
Yeah.
mean, it looks like he doesn't even train it. He can't get the takedowns as much as he used to be able to. And if you can't get the takedowns and you're relying on a submission, all Reyes has to do is just keep his back off the fence and he'll be fine. Now, I'm going Reyes all the way on this one, and it's kind of a morbid reason why, but Anthony Smith's head coach just died last week. Really sad, but that's going to be a huge mental toll. The guy's already, I don't want to say mentally weak because he's not a mentally weak guy, but he's mentally emotional where
Yeah.
these kinds of things get to him. Like you look at him in the Johnny Walker fight when he starts talking, you're trying to hurt my family. Like there's something up there, and it's not that he's not mentally strong because you look what he did against John Jones where he got the shit beat out of him for 5 rounds, could have taken the title off of a knee to the head, and he's like, no, I'm gonna keep fighting. Like the dude's tough as nails, but he's another one of these guys not the same. This card, if you're looking at it just through the prelims to here, you're like, man, 5 years ago this would have been fucking, and it's a great card. Like these matchups are still gonna, a lot of them are gonna produce great fights. I don't think this will be one of them. I think this is gonna be kind of a dud, but I think Dominic Reyes gets it done, like you said, a touch and go thing where Reyes, yeah, he knocked out Dustin Jacoby. Jacoby's also like 40 years old. And Jacoby's had a long ass kickboxing career, came to the UFC, went back to kickboxing, is back in the UFC. The chin cracks at some point. Dominic Reyes, even though Anthony Smith's not knocking anybody out, he got knocked out by a jab from Ryan Spann. Like that jab flatlined him, and it wasn't like a
Yep.
combination that ended with a jab. It was a lead hand jab, flatlines him. So he's got no chin. Anthony Smith doesn't have the athletic ability to do what he needs to do to win the fight anymore. It's Reyes or bust for me, but I'm just kind of sad that I'm going to see these guys fight in the condition that they are. Like Reyes, I'm not super emotionally involved with, but Anthony Smith, after he lost to John Jones and went on a 4-fight skid, and then he comes back, wins 5 in a row, gets so close to the title, and then now he is where he is. But it's just I don't want to see these guys fight. Really, this is one of the
Yeah.
ones.
I mean, honestly, if you're asking me, I think this is another fight where we could see another fighter sail off in the sunset. I think win or lose, he realizes it's time to go. I think even after the last fight, he said, I expected to lose and I was going to retire, but he won. So now he's like, oh, the fire's relit in me. But like you said, with this coach passing away tragically, I don't know that that fire is still there. And you know what? He could use that as motivation, but like you said, I don't see that happening.
It's hard to turn it around that fast. If
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to use this as a betting line or anything, but if it was something that happened at the beginning of the camp and he could kind of manifest it, be able to grieve and get over that initial hurt process and then kind of turn it into that energy, but with it being just so fresh, it's there's no turnaround on that. There's no way you could harness that and get over that. So sad to say, but I think that Anthony Smith is losing this one, and then I don't think he'll retire in the ring. I think that he'll come out on Believe You Me and be like, "Yeah, I'm done," in a real like nonchalant way, like a lot of these guys like to do. Just be like, "Yeah, I'm retired," and hope the world goes crazy when he does. But we're kicking off the main event now, or the main card now. We got Do Ho Choi taking on Nate the Train Landwehr. This one's not going to last long, I don't think.
Yeah. What do you got? Let me hear what you got.
I got Do Ho Choi actually. Because Nate
Okay.
Landwehr gets hurt early in fights. He goes in, caution to the wind. Doo Ho Choi, he's like a first round knockout or bust, I think. He's got the power. He's another one of those guys that I don't think he's got a gas tank, really. I don't think that he trains super hard. Just he was out of the game forever. He came back. He's he's done everything he's gonna do in the UFC with his fight with Cub Swanson. Like that was his pinnacle of achievement. But he's got first round power. Nate Landwehr comes in wild. And one thing about Landwehr is he gets hurt in almost every fight in the first round. Against a guy like Doo Ho Choi, he's one of the few guys that can actually put your lights out at 145. I want to see Nate the Train win. He's fun as hell. He's fun on the mic. He's an entertaining fighter, but I do think that he's going to come into this just being overconfident. He's riding high off his last couple wins, and I think that he's going to come in kind of hands down, just swinging bombs. And I think it's going to be kind of shitty to see him get knocked out. But I think that's what's going to happen here with
Hey, you know
Superboy.
that's totally fair, and I think your assumptions are valid. However, I'm going to go with Nate Landwehr. You look at Du Ho Choi's record. Sure, he knocked out Bill Aljo, but it was in the second round. Kyle Nelson fought to a draw in round 3, and then his last 3 fights, 2 knockouts in a decision. Charles Jourdain knocked him out. Jeremy Stevens knocked him out in 2019. Although Landwehr gets hurt, I think he can recover. We watched that fight with David Onama. That was a goddamn war.
That was awesome.
Got hurt, recovered, was fine. David Onama's got power, and I think he's got more power than Du Ho Choi. So for me, yes, I think he does get hurt. I think round 1's going to be a firework fight. I think Du Ho Choi is going to fade, and I think Landwehr puts him out.
Yeah, and that could absolutely happen. And I don't think Doo Ho Choi's got like that one punch power where he's just anything he throws, but he's one of those guys that he knows how to throw a really accurate shot. And I just think with a guy like Nate Landwehr, that seems to be what gives those guys problems. It's not the big heavy power puncher that's going to trade bombs with you because that's what he wants. He wants to be
Yeah.
like woken up by that. But when you're stung by something just straight down the middle, whether his elbow locks as it's hitting you and you just get all that pop, I think that's what's going to do him in. I could be wrong. I want to see Nate win because he's like I said, he's super fun on the mic. He's super fun, but something's telling me he's riding too high. One of those guys that is going to be super fun in the UFC as long as he's here, but I don't think he's ever going to be. If he wins this fight, then people are going to be saying, well, we got to talk about him in the top 15 or fighting a top 15 guy because he's been on this run. And he's definitely not that kind of fighter. And I'm not saying Doo-Ho Choi is either, but I just think in Landwehr's mind, he's like, he's probably going into this fight. If I get knocked out, I don't lose because I'm already playing with house money. If I get the
Yeah,
knockout, it's so. I think when you got that kind of mindset, if that's what he has, then he could see the door when he gets hit with that shot. But he's a warrior. He recovers. It'd be awesome to see him win. I can't wait to
agreed.
hear him on the mic when he does. And then let me hear what you think about this one. Bryce Mitchell, Cron Gracie. What?
Yeah, so this one was shocking to me. And honestly, with the reasons you just said that we took Mospar and Aljo off of the main event, you replace it with something that's probably worse, honestly.
A lot
Now, to
worse.
me, I just recently got into jiu-jitsu, so like I'm actually stoked for this fight. I'm curious to see how Bryce Mitchell handles Kron Gracie. Gracie comes from the Gracie family legacy. My man's got killer submission. He hasn't been active in MMA. He hasn't fucking fought. He's 5-2. Bryce Mitchell 16-3. Bryce Mitchell coming off of a nasty knockout from Josh Emmett.
Should have
And
retired.
I think that plays into your fight game for sure. However, maybe not as much when you're fighting Kron Gracie, who is probably going to pull guard and try and submit you. Bryce
Yeah.
Mitchell is also a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu practitioner. I'm curious to see if he can fend off what Kron has. I don't know if he can. I'm going to tell you right now on my paper I have right here, I have Mitchell winning, but fuck it. I'm going to go Kron Gracie submission.
See, I could see that too because I like Bryce Mitchell, but he is dumb as fuck. Like in that Ilya Topuria fight, he was actually doing a lot better on the feet than Topuria was, and he's not a striker. And what's he do? He tries to go to the ground with Topuria. Topuria takes him out quick. He's not a smart fighter. He's a strong fighter. Like he goes in there and he just bullies the shit out of people. If he goes in there and tries to wrestle Kron Gracie, that's going to be a nightmare. But I'm still going with Mitchell because did you watch Kron Gracie's last fight a couple years ago?
Oh, yeah.
One of the most embarrassing UFC performances between him and Claudio Puelles versus Dan Hooker when he fought Hooker and was trying to do Imanari rolls for two
Oh,
rounds till he
yeah.
ran out of gas. I mean, to go out there and just pull guard, pull guard, pull guard, and be like, no, I want to represent the Gracie name. I guarantee you, Henzo and Royce and all those guys are like, what the fuck was that? Like we went out there and hit people. Like you laid on your back and said, hey, come get submitted. Like if and what's weird is before that he didn't fight that way. He went out and he would have wars. He wasn't a great striker, but he'd strike with you and he had a chin. And then to take a couple years off after his loss, come back and fight that way, it's like if he, I hope he doesn't fight that way again because that was pathetic. But if he does anything like that again, Bryce Mitchell could just walk over top of him and start throwing hammer fists when he tries to pull guard because it's not the same thing as it was when Hoist was able to do it, when his brothers were able to do it. Even Naaman Gracie over in Bellator, you watch him. That dude developed a striking game, developed elbows. He adapted to MMA, and Kron Gracie seems resistant to that for some reason. And
Yeah. I mean, even back in the day, the Gracie, Hoist, Henzo, and Neiman, like you said, for your jujitsu to be relevant, you're going to have to get in a striking match, whether that's getting hurt or hurting somebody. And 9 times out of 10 with the Kron Gracie, you're going to get hurt because you have no hands. I think his only saving grace is Bryce Mitchell does not have hands either. Bryce
no,
Mitchell does not knock people out. He goes to decision or he submits you. I don't think he's submitting Kron Gracie. I don't know after Josh Emmett if he has the desire to stay on his feet and get caught. Not
yeah.
saying that Kron could catch him, but he could. I mean, it's a fight after all.
And it's
So,
going to be in your head if you get hit with the jab, it could just flash everything
of
back, and he's going
course,
to be
yeah.
like shoot the takedown, get submitted early. I could also see this weird thing happening where Bryce Mitchell just uses his farm strength and like try arm triangle or yeah, head and arm triangle from the top position, and people are like, "Oh my God, he submitted Kron Gracie," and it's like that wasn't technical ability. That's because that dude is strong as fuck and
Yeah,
lives on a farm and doesn't lift weights. He just fucking picks up bales of hay and chases chickens around. Like I could see that happening. I
for
don't think
sure.
it will, but he is so strong, and Kron Gracie is such an anomaly as far as like great jiu-jitsu, great in BJJ tournaments, but then and he was great in MMA until he started losing, and then it was like once he lost that confidence, and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna go out there and make it a BJJ fight. And if someone doesn't want to engage in that, then you're fucked. And if Bryce Mitchell just does his wrestling, and he's a great wrestler, he could just be on top of him, not allow any submissions to take place. Because Kron Gracie's not that strong. He's not going to be able to like kick Bryce Mitchell off of him and use butterfly hooks to kind of elevate. I know they've got great technical ability, but Mitchell's strong as shit, and Kron Gracie really isn't. He doesn't. He just he relies solely on ability the way his uncles did. It's a different game than when his uncles fought.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, so that brings us to the heavyweight Cyril Gahn versus Alexander Volkov 2. We're having a rematch. Volkov's a huge dog in this, plus 275. And I get where people are going to be like, oh, you're just looking at Gahn versus John Jones. But I'm really not, because Alexander Volkov, he destroyed Sergey Pavlovich. I mean, he just a clinic on the feet, frustrated the shit out of him. He's finally figured out how to use his range effectively. That was always his biggest problem. He's this towering guy that could not use his range, and now he can do it. And Cyril Gahn, you listen to him in interviews, you listen to him even before the John Jones fight. He seems like a guy that's checked out. He's a superstar in France. He's in movies. He's doing media coverage for the Olympics, all this random stuff. And I think that we're going to see Volkov. He's kind of coming into his second run. Cyril Gahn, I think, is on a skid. You look at him against Tai Tuivasa. Tai Tuivasa had no business hurting Cyril Gahn. He shouldn't have even been able to touch Cyril Gahn. And if he can touch Cyril Gahn with those short T-Rex arms, Volkov could just sit on the outside and poke and poke and poke. And if it goes to the ground, Cyril Gahn had a bunch of crazy submissions when he first came to the UFC because he's fighting those bums that we talked about earlier that are brought in to lose. If it goes to the ground with Volkov, Volkov's probably got the ground advantage there. As far as wrestling, he's not going to be the physically stronger guy, but he's got more submissions and he's going to have the ground and pound advantage too. I don't think Gahn takes it serious as much as a lot of these other fighters. He doesn't seem like he's worried about improving his wrestling, because after you lose a fight to Francis Ngannou the way Cyril Gahn does, you think, all right, what's this guy going to do? He's going to just drill wrestling this whole damn camp. And what's he do against John Jones? The worst. I've never seen a more elementary submission than that. Like, that
He didn't even
was,
have it locked in. He really
yeah,
didn't. You listen to the commentators, like, what did he tap from?
yeah.
But he didn't have it locked in.
It was like it was an uncomfortable tap. Like, oh
Yeah.
shit, my neck's being pushed down, so I'm gonna tap
It
out.
was a
Like,
jaw crank, as all it was.
yeah, and when you see people tap to jaw cranks, usually it's in like the third, the fourth round when they're starting to get tired and they're like, shit, he's crushing my face and I can't breathe and I got blood coming out of my nose. I have to tap. That was like a minute and a half into round one. I mean, I don't think Gon's got that same desire. I think Volkov's kind of got a fire under him. Volkov was a pretty big dog against Sergey Pavlovich. I think he's going to pull this one off too. I don't think Gon's going to be able to do what he did in the first fight where he bounced in and out and kept at range. Volkov's a much smarter fighter than he used to be. I think Volkov is going to take this, and I think it's going to be a pretty easy fight for him too.
You know, it's funny. I actually thought that we would disagree on this fight, but I actually agree with you 100%. I think Volkov pulls this out. I think he learned from his last fight, and I think, like you said, I actually err more towards the side. Yes, he's got that range. Yes, he can keep him at bay. Cyril Gahn's a kickboxer, though. I am not. If I'm Volkov, I'm not fucking staying on my feet. I will touch him and I will take him down and I will submit him. Cyril Gahn's submission game, as we just said, John Jones didn't even have a fucking submission lock in your tap. Like Volkov just needs to lock up. I head arm triangle, like you just said with Kron Gracie. I think Volkov could do that here. Sure, Cyril Gahn posts all these pretty Instagram photos of him training wrestling and jiu-jitsu. It's vastly different than you doing well in wrestling and jiu-jitsu. So I think he's going to have to prove it. I think, like you said, Volkov's got that fire under him. He's been on a fucking win streak. Cyril Gahn, pretty boy, France. I think France goes down again. Hopefully Russia pulls out a Brian Battles speech on the mic and gets us amped up for the next fight.
That would be pretty badass. And With Cyril gone too, one thing that frustrates me about him, when you have these guys that are like homegrown from places like France, or you look at Francis Ngannou, who's out of France from Cameroon, once they reach a certain point and they lose, they realize I got to go somewhere else. It doesn't mean leave your camp, but they realize I got to go drill with other people because I have beat the shit out of everybody in my gym and I'm the top guy and there's people out there that are better than me. You got to get he doesn't do that. He doesn't leave France, he doesn't leave his gym. And that'll get you so far, especially when you're a world class soccer player like he was, and you're a freak athlete who's 6'4" and 265 pounds of shredded muscle. You're going to be able to go far in just about any sport you do. But once you start playing those chess games, it's kind of like a much higher level version of Greg Hardy, where Greg Hardy came into the UFC 4-0, knocking everybody out, and then yeah, Tai Tuivasa fight, that one was whatever. But everyone else after the Tuivasa fight that beat him was like, oh, we take him down and we ground and pound, and that's it. You find out how to beat these guys, and the only way
Right.
to stop that from happening is going and training with people that could beat you. Like he needs to go and be like, hey, John Jones, I'm never going to be able to fight you again because you've got 2 or 3 fights left. But how about you let me train with you and get better? Or go over to Dagestan and learn some wrestling. Like there's a lot of options that he just doesn't take advantage of. He's more interested in doing the movies. He wants to be a media guy. He just that's his thing right now. And more power to him. He's probably making a shit ton more than he would in the UFC because he doesn't have a ton of fans. He's like a
Yeah.
guy that makes it to the top and is still probably making a 250,000 fight contract. Like he's not a guy that brings attention. So I think Volkov takes this, and I think it's going to be a lot easier than what the odds makers are making it look. It'd be cool to see Cyril Gane win, but if Gane wins, it's going to be a really boring striking affair. That was
Yeah.
when he was on that big run when he was beating everybody. I he was my least favorite fighter because it's like watching a Dagestani with no striking, watching Cyril Gane strike. It's a heavyweight with no power. Guy that's just not going to put you out. He's not even going to put himself in danger to get hit. He's going to go out there and flick his jab out, not even throw it, flick it so it taps your nose, flick his kick so it taps your belly. He's not trying to do damage. He's a point fighter. And Volkov's nasty. Volkov will get in there and swing with you. And he'll make it a fight. He'll take him down with body locks. He'll be able to shoot doubles on Cyril Gane. There's just so many paths to victory I see for this Volkov versus this Cyril Gane. But that brings us to the co-main event. 5-round fight. Jan Machado-Garry, the cuck, taking on Shavkat Rakmanov. How do you see this going down? I've got a lot of things going in my head how it could go down. I'm still kind of unsure. I've got a pick for us, but I'm not 100% sure on this one.
I want to hear what you got. You go first.
All right, so they say these guys train together. So Shavkat, they say that Shavkat was tapping him out all the time in practice at Killcliff. That was like 5 or 6 years ago. And just like I said with Cyril Gane, who doesn't go out and get better, Ian Gary went all over the world. He went to England to train with Leon Edwards to make his striking even better than it is. He went to Shuto Box with Damian Maia and Charles Oliveira to learn jiu-jitsu. There's not a better place in the world to learn jiu-jitsu right now than with Charles Oliveira and Damian Maia. I mean, this dude, and against MVP, I know he didn't finish the submission, but you could see the levels to his ground game improving and that he's got an understanding of the ground game now that he's not going to go down there and be panic and get the shit beat out of him like he probably would have early in his career. And I think he's a lot cleaner on the feet than Shavkat. He might not have the power advantage, but in a 5-round fight, we haven't seen Shavkat go 5 rounds. We haven't seen Ian Gary either, but Gary's never looked gassed in a fight. He's in phenomenal shape. Shavkat's looked gassed in fights before. I think, listen, I think there's a path for Gary to get it done. I think there's a path for him to get it done, and he's not going to finish him if he gets it done. It's going to be a 49, 46, 48, 47 definitive decision, though. But there's so many more tools for Shavkat to get it done. Song Kanan, who sucks ass, hurt Ian Gary. He could Shavkat could hurt him with even though his striking's not super technical and Gary's way better on the feet. If he catches him with one strike, he could hurt him and then he could put him out, or he could hurt him and club and sub him. And that he's going to be a danger for 2.5 rounds at least. And that's one of those dangers like a step below Hamzat. Like Hamzat's coming at you, and you're just like, shit, I gotta hold on. Shavkat's not that scary, but I think Shavkat's taking it. I don't want to see him take it, and I hate Ian Gary. Like, can't stand him on the mic. Can't stand. I couldn't stand him since his first UFC fight when he got on the mic and said he's the next Conor McGregor. Hated him since then, but it's gonna be. I think Shavkat takes it. I think Shavkat probably gonna finish him too. Second round, I'm thinking. But if it gets out of that second round, past the halfway through the third, I'm gonna put live money on Gary when he's like a huge dog after Shavkat beats him up for 2 rounds. I think we're gonna see Gary be like, okay, I've been here. I know how to defend my back. I know how to deal with guys when I'm tired. I go to Shuto Box where they just spar for 18 rounds at a time and beat the shit out of each other. Like that's a legit gym with tough guys. And I don't know. It's a tough one to call because these guys were training partners. There's all this shit being talked, and you don't know what's happened in those 5 years. Also, Shavkat's been really inactive. So
That's fair, man. I agree with a lot of the things you said. Ian Gary, man, I tell you what, this is his Conor McGregor moment. My man wants to make a name for himself. This is where you do it right here. You've done the transitions. You changed teams. You're fighting at a shoot-to box. You're claiming Charles Oliveira as your best friend. You're training with Damian Maia. Your jiu-jitsu is supposed to be next level worldwide, but you can't even submit MVP. I was at
yeah,
that fight. I watched it. Look, I get it. A fight's a fight, and it's tough. You had MVP's back in the first round while you're dry, and you can't finish a submission, and
and
you're fighting at a shoot-to box.
he had that rear naked locked in for like a minute and a
Dude,
half.
he had you could finish it,
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm
it showed
saying.
a clear lack of experience. Like, sure, okay, well, I'll give him this. He hadn't been training at shoot box long. I think it was like 6 months or something like that. So, like, yes, I get it. Learning that kind of skill is enormous. It's a big task. But if you have a submission locked in, finishing in it is not something that you learn. It's just an
That's
easy thing to do. Like
that's
you just finish it.
that's one of those things that like when you have the submission locked in, you have to have that killer instinct to be like, okay, I trust that it's locked in. Push the back of the head, finish the fight, like hide the
Yeah, there were
hand.
different ways that he could have definitely gone about that, and like I get it. Like I said, he was new to shooter box. He's been there for a while now, and I think that is actually to his advantage. But I don't think that he's been there long enough to be the killer that he thinks that he is. He's not going to go out there and beat Charles Oliveira and just lay on his back and fucking submit somebody. That's not Ian Gary.
Right.
Ian Gary's strength is striking, and I think, to be honest, going to shoot to box has taken that away a little bit because now he wants to focus on being that well-rounded MMA fighter. Brother, stick to what you got. Stick to what got you to the MMA. Yes, sharpen those skills, but don't fall back on something that you half-ass have been training. Half-ass as well. I'll say half-ass as well. But it's not your main. It's not your main skill, dog. Like hurt somebody on the feet, and then if you have to reach in the toolbox and rely on your shoot to box training and submit somebody, fucking submit somebody. That's
So
what I think.
I like what you just said a lot there, where you think going to Shuto box hurt his striking because I have noticed that in his last few fights. If you look when he first came to the UFC, he was a McGregor-esque striker where like I was like I hate this guy, but he's really good. And now he doesn't have that same pop on his strikes. He's not quite as accurate. He's still a really good striker, but he's not throwing. It's almost like he's throwing to lead to something else, but he doesn't know what it's leading to. But so that's a problem for him. I still think he'll have the striking advantage with Shavkat, but I think that fight with MVP. If you, I don't know if you saw the backstage stuff because you were there. So the backstage stuff that came out after he's hanging out with Charles and Gilbert Burns and stuff, and they're talking about the submission. And
Yeah.
like he was like, I don't know why I couldn't get it under the chin, and then they show him, and I was like, that fight might have given him the confidence to fight on the ground, like that's a big thing too for a striker to go out there and dominate on the ground. I mean, Bo Nickel, a good example of the inverse, looked like shit in his last fight. I mean, as a striker, as someone that grew up boxing for years and years, I'm like, this guy fucking sucks at boxing. He needs to take this fight down. But what he did was he gave himself confidence and he went out there and he showed he can do that. He can use it not against the top guy in that area, but he showed that it's an element of his game that and it builds the confidence. If Ian Gary just if anything else that MVP fight did was build confidence of being on the ground with anybody and saying, "Hey, I don't have to be the B side when I'm on the ground. I train at fucking shoot box." Like just being not being afraid to go for it, and that might be his downfall. He might end up in a submission because he's got the confidence. He's a little more cocky on the ground. I just think having that confidence for a striker to have fought that ground game, to have dominated on the ground the way he did, it does say a lot for him. And it'll be interesting to see how that translates because Ian Gary is a guy that every time he steps up, and I don't think he's going to win this. If he does, I think it'll be a decision. But he does step up every time. He seems to be kind of the striker version of Bilal, where it's not a real entertaining fight, but he's got this game plan going in. He knows what you're going to do. He's going to do the opposite and not let you fight your game plan and beat the shit out of you for 15, 25 minutes, whatever it is. I don't think it's going to work because Shavkat's a boogeyman. Shavkat's a monster. But if anybody other than Bilal at 170 could get it done, it's going to be Ian Gary. That's the only guy that could be a challenge to Shavkat other than Bilal, I think, at this point.
Yeah. Two final points before we move on. MVP has no ground game. If
That's
you
not
can't
true
submit,
anymore.
if you can't submit MVP with a submission locked in, you
Hey,
ain't fucking submitting Shavkat.
MVP beat Carlos Condit on UFC Fight Pass 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago in a BJJ.
Carlos Condit, who's what, 55 years old? What's going on?
Hey,
All right, come on.
hey,
All right.
hey.
The legend killer, I love him. The dude's old. All
Yeah.
right. MVP, his ground game in MMA is laughable. And if you can't submit fucking MVP when you have a submission locked in, you're not submitting Shavkat Rakmanov. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and
I want to see Ian win. Do I think he's going to? No. I think he'd be way better for the UFC if he did. I think he can talk better on the mic. I think he's going to make people hate him more, which will make them watch more because they want to see him lose. Shavkat's not going to fucking say shit when he gets on the mic. What's he going to say? But Shavkat's just more well-rounded, man. I mean, sure, he's not as crisp as Ian Machado-Garry, but these dudes have trained together, like you said. They have been in the gym together, and no matter what, you know and I know, you train with somebody and you lose to somebody so often that's in your fucking head, and you're never going to forget it. You're going to walk into that ring and be like, well, the outcome's already written because I've lived this fight. I've been here multiple times. So who knows?
I had in boxing when I was competing in Junior Olympics and got runner up my last year. There was this guy in my gym. We started a week apart from each other boxing. We had both been doing it for like 6 years at this point. And he beat the shit out of me every sparring session. And then when we'd go to fight, I would beat guys that would beat him. And he would lose to guys that I'd beat. But we would always alternate weight classes. And my coach would give us the option, like, do you want to fight him? And I'm like, no, I know how it's going to go. I can beat up everybody in this gym except for him, who's my exact size. I can beat up guys 20 pounds more than me who, not as much experience. But this guy will beat me 10 times out of 10, guarantee. So that's a good point. It's just when you hear people talk about that stuff and you hear the stuff that Shavkat was winning, he was tapping people out, that's coming from Killcliff. That's still Shavkat's gym. Ian was exiled from there. So it is kind of questionable, like, how valid is it? Because gyms do that. They just hype their fighter up and they'll say, especially when someone's left, they're like, that guy was terrible. You look at the Colby Covington thing with was it ATT or Alpha?
It was ATT, and I'm curious to see how he does in his next fight. I'm hoping that the real Colby Covington shows up, but Jesus Christ, if the last one shows up, good night.
Yeah, I think Colby Covington's kind of washed, and Joaquin Buckley is the worst fighter for a guy that is no longer athletic because
that could be a whole nother podcast, honestly, at this point.
Yeah, can't wait for that one. But we'll move on to the main event. So we both think Shavkat. We want Ian, even though I'm not a big Ian fan. I think it'll be good for business. And real quick, how cool would it be Islam versus Ian Gary? They're talking about Paul Hughes versus Umar Nurmagomedov.
Yeah. Well,
He,
Connor's got his own problems, man. That dude, the last thing he needs to worry about is the MMA. All right.
yeah,
However, yes, Ireland, Russia, Dagestan, Connor's boy, like
and
it would be a
Ian,
rematch in the making, but Islam would wipe the floor with him. It wouldn't even be fun. It would literally be. It would be McGregor Khabib too.
the only thing I think is Islam's not a huge 155er. Like he cuts a lot of weight because he's muscular. Ian Gary's a huge
And he's tall
170er.
as fuck.
Like if if he just trains wrestling, Islam's not going to be able to do anything on the feet to
If
him
he
because whatever.
trains, he needs to train with Craig Jones and learn how to defend Dagestani wrestling because the only person we've ever seen sufficiently defend Islam is Volk. And
Yeah,
Volk, literally, Craig Jones put out an instructional against Dagestani wrestlers after that you could buy.
yeah.
So, just saying, Ian Gary, if you're watching this, which you won't, buy that goddamn tape.
You really need it for all of those like Slavic region wrestlers, the
Yeah.
Middle Asian, European area. Like they all do the same thing now, except for Ankalaev, who's dead set on striking with Pereira.
Dude, I don't know what the fuck's wrong with that guy, but
Well,
yeah.
and he's had this title fight on the horizon for like 5 fights, and he has not learned how to defend a calf kick. And that guy is going to get murdered. Like
Yeah.
his leg's gonna break, and then his jaw's gonna break. Speaking of breaking jaws, though, Kai Asakura, King of Japan, Ryzen, two-time Ryzen champion. He's taking on Alejandro Pantoja, making his UFC debut. This dude's super exciting, but UFC debut for the belt, it's fucking weird. We don't see it often. Power puncher, strong as shit, underrated ground game, but in Ryzen, we we don't know what that means. He's fought guys that have been in the UFC, fought guys that have been Bellator champs, but we don't know what that means in Ryzen. So how do you see this fight going? Because Pantoja's a fucking beast. He's getting kind of up there. He's been in some wars just this year. I mean, he's taken a lot of damage over the past 12 months. So how do
Yeah,
you
man.
think this fight's
So
going?
I was curious, and like you said, Kaya Sakura's got some hype behind him. He's coming from Ryzen. He's the former champion, coming right over. I mean, this is like your dream as a UFC fighter. We always ask for Bellator, Ryzen, one crossovers, champion versus champion, and this is what we're kind of getting right now. Yeah, he's fighting under the UFC banner, but he didn't lose his belt. Like he came over with the belt technically, so it is champion versus champion. And I've watched a lot of breakdown on this. I love Demetrius Johnson and the way he breaks down fights and the way that Kai Asakura is able to control himself and close the void so quickly. Um, I think that might be a problem for Pantoja. Pantoja will give away rounds. Pantoja is a slow fighter and he will build and build and build. My issue is I thought that Pantoja was going to lose to Steve Urseg. I thought Pantoja was going to lose to Brandon Royval. I thought Pantoja was going to lose to Brandon Moreno. But every fucking time, my man's come out on top. And honestly, as the fight goes further, he seems to get stronger and he seems to figure some shit out. I think if he wants to win this fight, he needs to take down Kai Asakura and he needs to control him. Yes, Kai has an underrated ground game, but his only real strategy for winning is to knock you out
Yeah,
and
there's
to
levels.
break your jaw. There's really nothing else there for him. Pantoja's got that black belt Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's also decent on his feet. We watched against Steve Ursay. Steve Ursay kind of picked him apart at some points, but he figured it out come round 3, 4, 5, and was able to fend him off and still win by decision.
Yeah.
I think he's got that durability. I think he can survive, and I'm going to go Pantoja by decision.
So I was really torn on this fight because Pantoja, yeah, he's got that durability, but he fights so smart and so dumb. He fights to win fights. He's got great wrestling. His gas tank's insane. The BJJ amazing. But this guy will go out there. We saw it in the Usyk fight when he doesn't have to strike with a guy, and he'll strike with him. And you can't do that with Kai Asakura. Now, I've learned my lesson. I'm not picking fights based on what possibly could happen from these positions where I keep hearing these guys from the UFC. They must have been given a script to say this, but like Bisping and Kenny Florian and John Anik were talking about it. The knee from Kai Asakura, the knee he throws when you shoot a takedown, that could easily knock Pantoja out. Yeah, it could, but so could anything else he throws.
Yeah.
Like don't lead me into this like, oh, watch out for that deadly knee, because in the UFC that knee is just a single leg waiting to happen.
Hmm.
One thing I don't like about Kai Asakura watching him fight, he gets so off balance when he misses his shots. And that off balance is going to lead right to a body lock, just like he did with Steve Ursig. And I said underrated ground game, but there are levels to it, and Pantoja's much better on the ground. Pantoja, as long as he doesn't fight dumb and doesn't try to prove his dominance, he should win this. But if he goes out there and tries to strike with him, I don't think he can eat his shots, because Asakura, he's dropping from 135 to 125. They have a different weight cutting thing over there, kind of like one. So
Yeah.
it's different, but he's been knocking out dudes bigger than Pantoja. Pantoja's been beat up by Royval, ends up winning the fight. Beat up by Moreno, wins the fight. Beat up by Ursig, bad, wins the fight. At 125, that chin cracks. And when that chin cracks, it's done. And it happens like that. And when you take the kind of damage he has over the past 12 or 14 months, this could just be. I was talking to our buddy Smitty, and he was like, Dana's just trying to get this Pantoja guy over. And I was like, I think he's trying to get that Japanese crowd that he couldn't get from Tatsuro Taira when Tatsuro lost to Brandon
Yep.
Royval.
Yeah.
That Japanese crowd is something different. They
They know. I mean, that's where pride originated, man. Those guys love
exactly.
fighting. I mean, they love it. They absolutely love it. I
They
think if Kai is able to pull this out, we're going to see an influx of Japanese fans that we've never seen before. We'll start having more fights in Japan. Honestly, um, I think it would be great for the sport. I just to be the champ, you got to beat the champ, and there's only really one way. I think Kai wins, and I don't know if Pantoja is going to go out that way.
right. The only fighter I'll bet on knockout every time is the Black Beast, Derek Lewis.
Oh,
I
of
will,
course.
I will bet knockouts on that guy. Well, and
Yep.
Pereira, of course, Pereira. But Asakura, I don't know till you show me. I want him to win because I think it would just be a great way for the UFC to close the year. For some people are like, "Oh, how embarrassing would it be if the Ryzen champ came over and did that?" But Ryzen's lightweight divisions are fucking killers. You got Kyoji
Demetrius
Horiguchi,
Johnson was fighting there for a while, man. Like they fought the
DJ.
same guys. So
He and Kai Sakura, he beat Juan Archuleta, Horiguchi, Manel Kopp. He knocked Manel Kopp out. I mean, this dude's a killer. This dude is nasty. And as much as watching the tape, he looks ugly, he gets it done. And
yeah,
another thing, he's never fought in a cage, though. He's never had a fight in a cage. And it's a lot harder to defend those takedowns up against the cage, because on the ropes the ref's gonna
they
break you
stopped.
up. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
like, oh, you can't have your arms in the yeah. So cards are stacked against Asakura, but if he gets it done,
it'd be
fairy
sick.
tale ending to the UFC's year. They're gonna be like, this is great. We checked all the boxes. We've got Russia, we've got Spain, we've got Japan, and we've got America and Brazil.
Yeah,
I mean, but really, Pereira doesn't cover Brazil. He covers the world. If you watch him and his
yeah,
social media, that dude is a superstar.
yeah, man. I just worry about Kai. I mean, sure he's
It,
a rising champ, but fighting for the belt in the UFC, the fight capital of the world, is something different. Like it's the crowd's going to be different, the stage is going to be different, the cage is going to be different. There's a lot, like you said, the cards are kind of stacked against him. If he can pull it out, um, stand by because I think we got our next star in the UFC.
oh, for sure. So I'm gonna pull this up to make sure it was a knockout, but I know MMA math doesn't work. But so Alejandro Pantoja fought Manel Kopp, won a split decision, and he shouldn't have won that fight. Manel Kopp won that fight. That's what propelled Pantoja to this title fight, that he's to the title fight with Moreno and everything. That's how this whole thing started.
Kaya
And
Sakura won split decision versus Manel Kopp in 2018.
okay, and then he lost to
And
him
then
in
he actually got
2019.
knocked out by Manel Kopp in 2019.
Yeah, you're right. I'm looking at that. And he got knocked out in 2020.
Yeah.
Mm.
So Kyojo, I don't know how to say his last name. Anyway, he was the one that fought Demetrius Johnson. He beat him the first time they fought, but the second time they fought, he got knocked out. So my man's chin, questionable.
Yeah.
Um, we'll see. I don't know if Pantoja has that knockout power, to be honest with you, which is why I think it could go all 5 rounds. And if anything, it's going to be a submission. Um,
I,
but you can't take away from Kai's power. It's just there. So
It did you see the video on my Facebook a couple
yeah,
days ago
yeah, I
where he
watched it.
yeah, that was nasty the way he cracked that jaw. But you can't bet fights hoping that freak
Yeah, best
accidents
outcome's
happen.
not the way to bet.
Yeah,
The way to
like
bet is facts. So
after Jorge fought Ben Askren, I was just like, all right, betting goes legal in Ohio in January. I'm fading this dude all the way. Didn't bet on
yep,
the Diaz fight, but after that, I was like, this is easy money. They're gonna give this guy super inflated odds every time. And especially when MMA betting first went live, the odds were just terrible because they were all
yeah,
super pro fan favorite. And I was like, oh, now they've gotten a lot better, so you can't really clean up as much. But
for sure.
this card seems like one of those ones where you kind of can with the Cyril
Yeah,
Gahn fight with Evloev, big favorite, but you got Brian Battle, that dude. You bet on him by decision or under. I mean, there's money to be made on this card,
I agree, 100%.
and it's nice to see. But I always feel like these are the kinds of cards that are traps, though, where I'm like so confident in the dog. I got this dog pick locked, and then it's like I didn't get a single fucking fight
Yep,
right.
yep.
Like that's
I
what
think it'll be
happened.
fun, man. I think this is one of those sneaky cards where people look at the card and there's only really one big name fight, and it's Rakmanov and Ian Gary. Other than that, people look at the card and like, maybe I heard of Aljamain Sterling or maybe I've heard of Bryce Mitchell, but like
Right. The
I don't
casuals
really know.
don't
And
know.
those cards tend to be the sneakiest and the ones that produce the best fights. So I'm hoping that's this situation, honestly.
Yeah, like if you watched UFC in Macau a couple weeks ago,
Oh
that
my
was
God, dude. Yeah.
dude. I woke up at 3 a.m. to watch that over here, and
Same.
I was like, holy shit, this is insane. That doctor knocking the girl out, all the road
Yeah.
to UFC, it was insane. So those are the cards that get it done, and I really can't wait for this. I'm gonna be locked in. Probably gonna lose some money on this card, but that's what we
It
do. I mean,
happens, man. It
it
happens.
happens. You got to put money up to lose it.
Not there, of course.
But hey, thank you for coming on. That's all we got for you today. UFC 310 this Saturday, 6 p.m. prelim start Eastern time. And it's going to be a fucking banger. Don't let these other media outlets like Fight Bananas and MMA Junkie tell you it's a shit card because the names aren't there. The matchups are what it is. This is going to be an awesome card, and I cannot wait.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Like you said, don't listen to all the hype. Watch the fights. It'll pan out the way you want it to.
Exactly.